Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we creep into the deadly deliciousness of the Halloween season by sharing our killer picks for favorite candy packaging design.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, where we simplify the world of marketing for humans. I'm Shad Conley, and with me is my co-host, Patrick Jack-o'-lantern Jebber. That's your Halloween name and your wrestling name.
I love it. I love that it's very seasonal, too. You know, I have these seasonal nicknames. Patrick Summertime Jebber. Now I have Patrick Jack-o'-lantern Jebber.
Much like the leaves on the trees, your name changes with the seasons.
Ah, I like it.
In case you haven't guessed it, it's Halloween time. And you know what happens at Halloween time, Patrick? We get a new Halloween movie, which is what we're getting this year. Another Halloween movie. This one just called Halloween.
Yeah.
40 years after the original release of the first Halloween movie with Michael Myers. Which leads to our kickoff question here, which is a deep one, Patrick.
Okay.
Who's your favorite famous film slasher? Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, or Freddy Krueger?
I think I like Jason because he likes hockey. Except he's just moldy from being in that Crystal Lake for...
Well, you can't just be a regular guy with a regular face.
Why not?
Maybe that's the concept for the next series that'll go for another 40 years. Just regular people going psycho.
Yeah, I like it. I already like it. I like it. So who's your favorite out of those three guys?
For me, going back to childhood and everything, I think it's Freddy Krueger. Mostly because I think it's the most creative. The killer I thought was the most creative. The way he comes into your dreams. Everybody goes to sleep. So we can all relate to that. And that just led to the most surreal and weird ways to attack people or show you these weird things that have happened.
They also had a lot of humor in them.
Busting out the one-liners.
Yeah. But doesn't everybody go to camp? Like some weird camp where there's a, guy who drowned in the lake? Everybody goes there, right?
I guess so. I don't know. The Friday the 13th movies, I've never really totally been into those.
Unless you're Jason, was it like 10 where they were in space?
Jason X.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Jason mask from my youth, it was very, very recognizable, or the Freddy Krueger claw.
Yeah. I remember a lot of Jason and Freddy Halloween costumes when I was a kid. It was very cool. Very cool. So we're actually going to talk about costumes here in a minute. I'll give you one more little stat. They have a podcast about the making of the original movie Halloween. One of the things they were talking about was, since the original Halloween came out, guess how many total, like Halloween, Jason, and Freddy movies there have been since that original Halloween movie in 78?
So if they each did about 8 to 10, are there like 28, 27, 28?
I think they said there were 32.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, they've really monopolized horror movies for a long time. Even though they stopped making those movies for the most part, I think young people would still know who Freddy Krueger is. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm pretty out of touch on these things, as we've found out many a time in recent days.
Well, as we get older, we get further and further out of touch with youth and reality. So yeah, it's all good.
It's kind of our thing. So what we do know about costumes, probably won't see a lot of Freddy Kruegers this year. But what will we see? Let me tell you, Patrick. Actually, you know what? I'll pose this as a question to you. Let's see if you know this one. How much do you think American consumers will be spending on costumes this year?
I want to say $5 billion.
Wow. You went high.
Is that too high?
You overshot it because you thought it was going to be a high number.
Yeah.
Not that far off, though. According to the National Retail Federation, $3.2 billion.
Okay. That makes sense.
So they say 48% of Halloween celebrants say they will wear costumes. I'll tell you quickly what the most popular costumes are. Not Freddy or Jason. Spoiler alert.
I'd say one of them's got to be Fortnite.
That is not, at least not mentioned according to the National Retail Federation. Princess and superhero leading the pack. Pretty vague.
Of course.
Batman, and then Star Wars character. Those are your top four.
I feel like that never changes, does it? Does it ever change?
Though, I mean, those might not.
Yeah.
I don't know. When we go to adults, what do you think the number one costume is?
I always feel like it's the maid and the nurse, and it's usually like naughty occupations.
You're just off. You're in another realm. You're just off. You're thinking of like a college Halloween party. These ones are not really occupational, other than one. We've got witch, vampire, zombie, and pirate.
That makes sense now that you say that. None of those are naughty.
What I've found out over time is you can make anything naughty.
If you walk into a costume shop, that's typically what you see, the sexy version of every one of those Halloween costumes.
That's true. That is what's pushed and marketed. So I understand why your perspective is skewed. It's not your fault. It's society.
It's society that's done it to me.
Now there's one more category of costume that's on the rise. 31.3 million Americans plan on dressing up their pets in costumes this year. 31.3 million.
That's a lot of people.
What do you think the most popular pet costumes are? They're not naughty.
I'm going to say a witch, a zombie, a vampire, or a pirate.
Surprisingly, none of those made the
What?
list.
All the adult
There's
costumes?
Some odd choices for our pets. The
What-
top four look like this. Pumpkin. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Hot dog. Makes sense. Kind of obvious, I guess. Bumblebee. And then clocking in at number 4, devil. And also, I guess, tied for 5 is cat and dog. So I assume that's if you have a cat, you're dressing it as a dog, or you have a dog, you're dressing it as a cat.
That's just mean.
And confusing.
Yeah.
They look in the mirror and say, who am I?
It's like a Freaky Friday kind of thing, which makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, it's a body switch.
What a horrible joke to play on. That's awful.
It's all based on a survey, so this is a sample, and they're extrapolating from there, I think.
Well, I got some stats for you today, Shad. I mentioned we talk a little bit about Halloween candy this week on the podcast. So I picked a few facts about Halloween candy and Halloween in general to share with our listeners. So going back to your question about how much people will be spending on costumes, I was basing my guess on the overall expenditure for Halloween this year, which they estimated around $9 billion. Based on the total expenditure, they're estimating around 90% of Americans will buy candy this year, spending about $2.6 billion on it. $1 billion.
Yeah, it's a lot of dough. It's a big industry. Halloween's big business. Billions of dollars in economic growth each year.
Yeah, a lot of people love Halloween. Last stat I was going to just throw out there is in a poll in 2017, 45% of the public said Reese's is their go-to candy. 45%.
Does not surprise me. And maybe that's just my bias. That's my favorite candy.
That's an amazing accomplishment if you ask me, because there's a lot of candy out there.
This is true, but I think it's also the most marketed, don't you? It's like Reese's, M&M's, Skittles.
Yeah.
Those are probably the top 3 most marketed, maybe Snickers. Those are the ones you see the most commercials for. You'll see the most general online marketing for throughout the year, I think.
That's the question, right? Is candy companies know that this is how much people are spending at Halloween. They definitely should be marketing more. You figure Reese's, okay, so let's just say generically they have 50%, almost half, of that $2.6 billion in candy spend. $1.3 billion they're making, or thereabouts, right?
Yeah, jeez.
That's a lot of money, man.
Just at Halloween time.
Yeah, that's just at Halloween, so.
Well, we're going to bite into candy a little bit more here. In a minute, we'll tell you which Halloween candy wrappers pull out our eyeballs and tear out our hearts so that our unrequited love bleeds all over them. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
Today's sponsor is Farmers Insurance. Insurance can be confusing, overwhelming, and time-consuming. At Hire Insurance Agency, we remove the guesswork and hassle, helping you protect what matters most. We offer a wide range of auto, home, business, and life insurance policies to help you meet your specific needs. Call 844-543 888-858-3463 or visit hireinsurance.com. That's HYRE insurance.com for more information.
Here's a good Halloween trick. Buy a bunch of Reese's. There you go. Turn off all the lights in your house. Yeah. And then just don't answer the door. Not sorry, Reese's.
That was a clip from the Reese's commercial Trick, which has been making the rounds for the 2018 Halloween season. With its bright orange packaging, the iconic Reese's peanut butter cup wrapper in many ways represents Halloween. It's probably the first candy you envision when you think of the fall holiday, which is why we decided to make it ineligible for our list of best candy wrappers today. It just seemed too obvious, so we nixed it. We nixed it as an option.
We totally took it out of play. It probably would have made my list. Would it have made your list, Patrick?
Maybe. I'm glad we took it out because I think there's some bias in there too, and the fact that 45% of the people have it as their go-to. I mean, it's obviously effective packaging because of that.
It is. And so we wanted to, there's so many candies out there, shine a light on some other ones. I definitely would have picked it. I also took out Reese's Pieces because very similar packaging.
Yeah.
Reese's Pieces, though, very underrated candy. Delicious.
They are. I liked them a lot when I was a kid, but if I'm going to go for it, I just rather have a cup.
Have the whole thing. Yeah. Anyway, total side note. So what we're going to do now is we're each going to share our picks for 3 favorite candy packages. We're calling them, best candy wrappers. They're not necessarily just wrappers. They can be boxes. They could be some other version of candy packaging that's not a wrapper or a box, something else. They could be anything, though, is the point. They're not just really limited in any way. What'd you think? Hard or easy to make this list? How'd you feel about it?
I thought it was fairly easy. I narrowed my list down to some that I thought were fairly successful candies because I think there's something to say for good packaging leads to better sales and more popular product.
Yeah, there's probably some really awesome candy packaging for some, small scale companies who make candy that I've never heard of, but obviously I've never heard of them. So I've never seen them, don't have that exposure. So most of this stuff is on that level of popularity where if you're listening to this, you've probably heard of this candy before.
Yeah.
I will say I had a hard time with separating the candy that I like from the packaging that I like, kind of being objective about it and looking just at the packaging and not, my own candy cravings.
Yeah, that is definitely true. It's hard. You're always going to have some level of bias whenever you're making a list. So to distance yourself from that or separate yourself from your own biases, it's a hard thing to do. I feel your pain.
It definitely was a challenge for me. This is a list I could have made into a top 10. So obviously I'll have a lot of honorable mentions. What was the sort of criteria you used here to determine what makes a good candy packaging design, Patrick?
So, I always go with my gut, usually for my list. This one was actually a little bit more complex. And so I have 5 elements.
Just like the movie The Fifth Element.
Yeah, just like The Fifth Element. So I have 5 criteria. 1, typography. Is it fun? Is it easy to read on the packaging? Number 2, composition. How did they use the space? So for some candies, it's harder than others because the size of the candy, I took that into account. Color. Does the color work with the candy in question? I know you talked about Reese Cups and the orange, and it's very Halloween-esque. Imagery. Sometimes candy uses imagery like fruit for fruit-flavored candy. Do they use imagery of the actual fruit? Does that fruit imagery look appetizing? And then consistency. So not the consistency of the actual candy taste, but I looked at how they designed across different products and was the design consistent. What do you think of those 5 elements?
I think that's a fantastic list. I had 3 things, and you covered them all. My main ones were color, font, and then what I call the representation, which I think you hit on through some of those other things, is how the packaging itself represents what's actually inside there.
Yeah.
Some very well-defined criteria, though. That's great stuff. I'm looking forward to hearing your list.
You want to go first?
Yeah. So my first one is Spree. Spree are a fruity, tart candy, flat, colorful. That's how I would describe the Spree. They came originally in a tube. So they would all be stacked up and then have a wrapper around the whole thing. So it would be one long tube that you would pull them out one by one. What I liked about this package was it has the bright colors that capture the different flavors and sugariness of the candy, this fruit-flavored candy. Well, it uses this sort of elongated, rounded font that actually captures the shape of the candy. You know, the way they're spreading out these letters and using them, like the E's pretty much look like what you're looking at when you see the candy itself. As well as you have this sort of unique wrapper in this tube-like design. So that's why it was my number 3. It was a surprise number 3 with me. Do you know Sprees, Patrick?
I used to really like Sprees when I was a kid.
Yeah, I did too. I don't know if they're still around or not.
They are, I think. I mean, you know, a lot of those old candies are still around in some way. You could definitely buy them online. You could buy anything online.
Who doesn't love to buy old candy online, right?
Yeah, you don't know the expiration date of those things. But yeah, no, I remember those. That's pretty good packaging. I think they've updated the packaging over the years.
They might be in a box now.
Yeah, and I think they're also in bags, like a lot of times, you know, like M&M type bags now too. So
Boring.
boring.
The tube was one of the things that grabbed me. Was the tube itself is unique, and the way they worked the design around it I really liked.
Sweet Tarts used to have that same sort of design.
I remember Sweet Tarts, but I remember mostly the little 2 packages you would get for Halloween.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What's first up on your list?
So my number 3 is M&M's. I think it's a pretty easy one to sort of pull out. The typography is unique. It's remained consistent over the years, which I've really liked. The composition and color for M&M's are great. The color palette that they use for each flavor, because, you know, they have a ton of them now, they're perfectly suited for the actual flavor that they're promoting inside the bag. Imagery, they're always using those characters, which is a huge win in and of itself. When a candy has the ability to transcend the actual packaging, I think that's also a big indicator for me of how successful the packaging is. You know, those M&M's characters became something more. They work in tandem with promoting that product. And then consistency, they're generally consistent from product to product. The M&M's is always the same, typography is always the same, characters are always on the bag, the colors are very similar. So good stuff overall, M&M's.
Definitely a good one. You can't argue with that. One of my honorable mentions, I will say, is peanut M&Ms, which I like even better the way they use the yellow to represent the peanuts there. I feel like that's more of even a standout when you're looking at all the candy, that bright yellow with that M&M font on there. I really like that one.
Yeah. I also like, there's one that they have, which I don't know if it's a fairly new or recent one, but the carrot cake white chocolate M&Ms. That one has kind of the same qualities that you like about the peanut M&Ms, where it's a lighter package, but it's yellowish cream color, and it's got the girl M&M, and she's got little bunny ears on, so it's probably from Easter, I'm assuming. But that's a good one, too. I really liked that one.
I didn't even know that flavor existed. Is that good?
I don't know. I've never had them. Never had them. Which, there's so many. They have candy apple M&Ms. They have gingerbread. Some bizarre flavors out there.
Yeah, they have a lot. The peanut butter one's also delicious. Good packaging, nice. Orange, a shade different than the, Reese's orange.
Yeah, and very popular candy, so it should tell you something, too, about the effectiveness of the packaging.
Yeah, has to be up there with the Reese's Cup as the most popular candy, right?
Yeah. What's next on your list?
Well, we'll stick with chocolate. Because everybody loves some chocolate. And there's a lot of chocolate out there, especially chocolate bars, which means there's a lot of brown. When you're looking at a shelf of candy, and this, I guess, is another piece of my criteria. How does it stand out when you're looking at that sea of different candies? How does it grab you a little bit? Which is kind of why this one stuck in my mind. I guess unexpectedly, kind of like Spree. It was just one of the ones that kept coming back to me and popping into my mind. Snickers. And the thing about Snickers that's kind of unique is where most are more focused on the brown, Snickers is all about the font. It's this very large, bold blue, shadowy font that's actually on a white background with a candy bar shape outlined by red against a brown background. So there is still that brown backdrop there, that chocolate representation, but here it's all about drawing attention to that Snickers name. And I think there's so much going on here. It's so loud. Represents the candy bar itself, which is loaded. It's caramel, it's nuts, it's nougat, it's all that stuff smashed together. But it really stands out. Particularly this font really pops when you're looking at those candy bars on the shelves there. It's something they've used to effect with some of their marketing where they've even changed the name from Snickers on the bar to like hangry or have these different sayings on it. There's no confusion over what this is. People still know that's Snickers because it's so recognizable.
That's a good one. And there's something about the simplicity of Snickers that I like. The fact that they don't really go for all the bells and whistles in terms of imagery, even color. They don't typically play with color. It's that brown package with the typography, just like you described. There's something that tugs at my heartstrings in terms of design where you're that confident in that brand.
Yeah, it's definitely a brand before product design, which, is a risky move in a lot of cases, but in here it works. So what's next up on your list, Patrick?
So next on my list is Twizzlers. I picked Twizzlers because I just think in general, brand typography just works. It's always consistent. It's easy to read on the packaging and big and bold. Very quickly, you see that it's Twizzlers. But in addition to that, you've got this composition. Twizzlers is one of those that they allow the actual candy to be seen through the packaging, which I think the fact that they were confident enough that this candy is very recognizable. And then the color and the imagery are great across the product line. They use the fruit imagery that I mentioned early on in my criteria, and they use good quality looking fruit, and it's very popular.
Yeah, that's a really good one. A unique candy with, that red. You think of that Twizzlers red packaging, you can just almost immediately picture it. They do some good stuff the way the font works, that unique name on there. I like that. That's a good one, I actually wish I would have picked that. That's a good one.
Yeah, they seem like obvious choices. Hit almost all the big ones so far, but
I will say with my next one, slightly more, not obscure in any way, but not something you'd usually get for Halloween. It's a little off the beaten path, while still clearly a candy. But I think it's a good one. I think you'll agree. Andes Mints? In case you don't know, Andes Mints are these delicious combination of dark chocolate and cream de mint. Very excellent flavor. And the packaging on these, they're wrapped in these shimmery, dark green wrappers that have the Andes logo on there with a little mountain. And they just capture both the brand and flavor. An elegant wrapper with a perfect shade of shimmering green color. It tells you it's minty. It tells you it's a little bit high class. It's a little bit of a nicer candy. This is the good stuff you put out at Christmas, not what's necessarily going in your Halloween bag. And the wrapper makes you instantly identify it. It's your after dinner mint at the restaurant. You know that green coloring. You know that flavor. You know you want it in your mouth. And it's a good one. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. It's an unusual pick. I'm really surprised at that pick. It is a good design. I think not only is it a good design of the packaging, but then also I like the design of the actual chocolate too. Like taking that logo that they've created on the packaging and embossed it on the candy itself, which is an additional element of the experience of eating a candy.
It's a little ritzy, right?
Yeah. Is it an upper class mint candy?
I think of it as above the peanut butter cup, above your average candy. Like I said, you're not giving these out for Halloween. Slightly different class, lives in a slightly different neighborhood than the Sprees and the Snickers.
They are small, and kids will probably egg your house if you give these out at Halloween, because they'll be like, why do they have only Andes Mints and I only got one of those? That's not fair.
It's a risky move. You'd have to give out like those full packs.
Because, kids today are starting to expect things like full-size candy bars, which is insane. That's just insanity.
We know people who live in neighborhoods where they feel like pressured, where they all have to give out full-size bars. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
There used to be like, 1 to 2 people, all of trick-or-treating, you would go who'd have those. And it'd be such an anomaly. I can't imagine going and that's everything you get.
I think that's just a unrealistic expectation. Whoever started that, I get it. You want to be the cool house on the block and give out a full-size candy bar. But if kids are starting to expect that, you're just setting your kids up for failure in life. I mean, you just can't get full-size candy bars at every house.
That's a great lesson for the kids out there. I think us older people, we're just all trying way too hard to be cool. Give it up. We're not cool.
Give it up. Just stop passing out candy. Like the Reese's commercial, just turn off the lights and save them all for yourself, right?
Turn off your lights. Everybody in the neighborhood go dark. The billion-dollar candy industry will collapse.
Wow. Just think about that. That would probably start the apocalypse right there.
Probably. Riots. The Purge begins, which you would like because you love The Purge.
I don't know.
Flashback.
Yeah. So the last on my list, this is one that's a little off the beaten path, but by no means an obscure candy. Pez.
Oh, okay.
A candy that was near and dear to my heart as a child. I loved it. This just has everything. It's the pinnacle of candy packaging. Let me start off. The typography is perfect on this. It's unique and describes the form of the candy. These little tiny bricks that form the letters, Pez. Composition, color, consistency. If you're looking at just the small packs of Pez, they've made the simplest and best choices here. Using color and in some cases simple graphic elements, they've given you a sense of what the flavor you're going to get is. Yellow for lemon, red for cherry. Also, they have one of the best, fantastic examples of candy packaging. If you know what a Pez is, you understand what the Pez dispenser is. It's basically a little contraption, and they're all different shapes and sizes and all different characters over the years. It's almost like Legos, how they've franchised that out. But the Pez dispensing collection universe out there is insane. And what I would describe as cult followings of their packaging, I found, just for our listeners, Pez collecting as a hobby has grown to the point where several conventions are held annually around the world. The oldest convention is Pezomania, which has been held in Ohio since 1991. Ohio, our home state. The three most valuable Pez dispensers are political donkeys, each valued over $13,000. Insane, yes?
Totally.
Over 3 billion bricks are consumed each year in the U.S. alone. And by far, I think, one of the best product packaging examples for candy that has ever existed.
Yeah, it's a really, really good pick. Something I didn't even really think about, mostly because it's one of the worst candies ever made. It's awful. But really, wow, boy, does the packaging lift it up, you know what I mean? And make it into something better. The dispensers, that novelty, whoever thought of the idea, let's have this other thing kids can do with this candy, even though it's such a weird thing where it just, pushes it out a half an inch so you can grab it.
It's not functional in any way, shape, or form. A lot of times it doesn't even work correctly. And you spend a lot of time putting these little candies in the Pez dispenser for very little reward. You know what I mean? Like, other than the fact that it holds the Pez, usually you would fill it and then eat them right away. It would be different if you were holding them in this Pez dispenser to protect them throughout the day, but most people didn't. They would put it in and they would do, and you'd be done. You'd have to fill it again.
Yeah, and it's changed not at all since I was a kid, and now my kids have them, and they enjoy this experience of opening it up, putting them in, doing what you just said, this weird process, but it's such a fun little thing. Whoever came up with that concept, absolute genius. But yeah, the packaging itself, even just how the Pez are packaged in those square rectangular tubes, the way they have Pez written on them, it's really well done. It points to, I guess, what you would call the flavor of that awful, awful candy. They're just so chalky. I think they're one of the worst candies there is.
I don't really eat them today because all it is just chalky sugar, which is what kids like.
Chalky sugar, but it's not as good as other chalky sugar candies.
Well, and there might be a reason for that. I didn't know this, but Pez is an abbreviation of Pfefferminz, which I'm sure I'm butchering that name. It's German for peppermint. So I think the original Pez candy was peppermint. It probably makes more sense because it does seem more consistent with a mint than it is with a candy itself.
That makes sense. And also, I always just assumed they, made them real cheap because they're like, who cares what the candy tastes like? It's just going in this thing.
Yeah.
Kids just want to put it in this thing, which is true.
Yeah. So those are really good lists. I mean, I think we've covered a lot of great candy packaging for sure.
Very broad spectrum. It's always interesting when we make these lists. We always do different things in it. Us in general, as much as we think about the same things, like a lot of the same things, we just have a very different way of looking at the world. Things we gravitate towards are always different. So it's always interesting to hear your picks. And they're really good ones. Really good ones.
So I had a couple honorable mentions because I know you have your slew. Yeah. Whoppers. I like the way that the O in Whoppers is usually graphic of the candy, as well as Skittles. I think Skittles has a very nice package, simple in the execution of the typography, really well done in terms of consistency across all of the different flavors of Skittles. Again, very popular candy brand.
Yeah, Skittles is also one of my honorables. You see that red and that rainbow on there, so it's just solid. The other ones, I mentioned peanut M&Ms. I had that on here. Nerds, I thought, has a really good package that captures that candy. The only thing I don't like about it is they have weird snail-like nerd creature that they put on there.
Yeah.
Not a fan of that.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. A slug?
No.
Who wants to have a slug in their candy box?
Keep your slugs away from candy. Come on, nerds. I also put Pop Rocks on because they have packaging that looks like fireworks, and they have even the fonts kind of exploding like balloons. Guess what? They explode in your mouth.
They do.
Good and plenty. A candy I don't like in any way, but it's definitely got an original package that captures this weird medicine-like candy and stands out. And with its purple and white design, which is not something you see a lot in the candy world. And then the last one I had was Milky Way, which is another good candy bar, which uses the swirl of caramel color behind the font to represent, both the actual Milky Way and the interior of the candy bar. So I like that one.
But good picks, good honorable mentions. I thought you were going to have 40 honorable mentions since there's so many candies out there.
No, I cut it down. I had many more I considered, but then I, knocked them out for one reason or another.
Yeah. So that's it. On that note, let's get a final nugget of human wisdom. Human wisdom.
All right, Patrick. This week's nugget of human wisdom comes from John Carpenter, the director of the original Halloween from 1978, as well as the horror classic The Thing, and one of the most underrated movies of all time, Big Trouble in Little China.
Love it.
Here's what Carpenter told Interview Magazine about horror in 2015. Horror is a universal language. We're all afraid. We're born afraid. We're afraid of things. We're all afraid of things. Death, disfigurement, loss of a loved one. Everything that I'm afraid of, you're afraid of, and vice versa. So everybody feels fear and suspense. We were little kids once, and so it's taking that basic human condition and emotion and just effing with it and playing with it. You can invent new horrors. So what I think Carpenter's hitting on there is just that feeling, that how universal that is to be scared. Having that fear of all these sort of different things. And obviously, a huge part of marketing is tapping into emotions in different ways, whether in fun ways or in real ways. And part of that is kind of horror or fear.
Yeah.
It's a great emotional trigger. Whether it's tapping into the fun frights of Halloween or connecting to the fears people feel in everyday life. This universal language of horror has a wide application.
Yeah, I thought you were going to pick Herm Edwards again.
We could do Herm every time, because you do play to win the game.
Play to win the game! No, I think that's a great takeaway for sure, because again, horror, like he said, is just one of those universal things. And, we're talking about candy and Halloween today, but at the same time, for businesses, every business has some level of fear, and there should be some level of fear. That's what drives us to do better. It drives us to have better quality, better service offerings, better customer service. So I like that you touched on fear today, because fear drives business for sure.
That's deep, man.
I love Halloween.
I do too. Yeah, it's all about blood and tearing guts out, putting on masks, eating a bag of candy all at one time, and no one's going to shame you.
Yeah.
That sums it up. You guys done? Yep.
That's all we needed to know. Well, that's it for today's episode, everyone. You can find current and past episodes of the podcast on speakinghuman.com. While you're there, sign up for weekly emails and let Speaking Human lurk into your inbox every Friday like a dangerous psychopath stalking you with informative and entertaining marketing and branding updates. Yeah, we said it. We're going to lurk and stalk you.
We're going to lurk in your inbox.
Not in a bad way, though. We're not going to stalk you in a bad way.
No, it's the good stalking. Think we totally butchered our list of favorite candy wrappers today? Let us know about it. Tweet us about our deadly mistakes or let us know your own killer pick for best candy packaging using the hashtag #KillerCandyWrappers. We're at speaking_human on Twitter. That's at speaking_human on Twitter. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, zombies. Catch you then, human zombies. Catch you then, humbies. Insert shrieks of terror!
Speaking human.